Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Frank Ammirante. You can catch Frank at a lot of different places, 444 Football, the Game Day, RotoBaller, and the Fantasy Jones. Big news day, lot of takes going on the Twitter and all that. Of course, it's draft season, so a lot to talk about. Frank, how you doing?
Feeling good. NFL season right around the corner, and I'm also feeling good because Whit Merrifield just hit a grand slam, and I have him in my DFS lineup. So
Useful.
That put me into the money. But we're talking football here, and we're all excited for the NFL season.
Yeah. Well, one thing we'll start off with right away. You and I both do baseball and football. Trying to balance that in August and September. I mean, it's tough. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I still find it difficult.
Oh, yeah, it's really tough. The way I've done it is I've focused a little more on football and on player outlooks and thinking about how I feel about certain players. And for baseball, I'd basically focusing more on DFS now. It's easier to write about for me rather than thinking about, who's to buy, like which player to pick up or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm more focused on season-long managed leagues and all that, but it can be tough. So let's jump right into it because there's a lot of big news. Yesterday, I was finishing up the Sirius XM show, and we knew Travis Etienne got hurt the night before. It was a matter of weeks, at least at that point in time. Immediately after we signed off, of course, it was reported he was out for the season because that's the way it works. Whenever I'm recording something or I'm broadcasting live, breaking news happens right afterward. So this is huge news. James Robinson's now the starter. There's no question about it. He might have been the starter all along. I think that's a point you were bringing up on Twitter. And I it's interesting. I think now is the question is, what does this do to his value? Where are we putting him?
I look at James Robinson, as a high-end RB2. You have to love the production he has already under his belt. Finished as RB5 in PPR points per game last year. He won't have that same ridiculous workload, but he's still going to have the lead role, have goal line carries, take over the passing game. You'll likely see Carlos Hyde get some work, especially because he played with Urban Meyer at Ohio State, but it's obviously a huge bump for James Robinson. And I look at him as a high-end RB2. You've got to love the improvements they made on offense with Trevor Lawrence, Marvin Jones, and a new coaching staff. So I'm bullish on Robinson.
Yeah, I am too now, for sure. And, if you got him, I wouldn't say you lucked into him because he was going to have a role regardless. It wasn't like he's a handcuff. He's a guy that you're drafting as you're going to be playing at some points in time. But you did get a huge bump in value. But if you haven't drafted yet, well, I think it's a question. Let's do some either ors real quick here. James Robinson or DeAndre Swift?
That one's really, really tough for me. I go with a slight lean to DeAndre Swift just because of his receiving ability. He's going to get a ton of targets and checkdowns from Jared Goff. So I would slightly go towards DeAndre Swift, especially if it's a PPR format, even in half PPR too.
Yeah. The thing about Swift that scares me a little bit is his own groin injury and the fact that Campbell said the other day he's not sure if he's going to be ready for week 1. Now, week 1's just a starting point. It's not the whole season, but yeah, you don't want to take that question mark into your draft.
Yeah, that's definitely concerning hearing about that. We'll just have to keep up to date with any updates because obviously if we know that he's for sure his status in question for week 1, I'd bump up James Robinson because I hate really taking on any players with already injury concerns before they even play a game. That's obviously something to avoid.
One thing I'd argue in favor of Robinson, just generally, not necessarily versus Swift, but just generally speaking, Robinson versus anyone, is he might get a lot of passes too, because it's not like Hyde's a pass catcher. We know this. They don't have a tight end to speak of. Chenault will probably get a ton more receptions, actually. I think he's a guy that benefits sneakily from this too.
Oh, totally agree. I was actually going to mention that as well. He gets a huge bump. He's great after the catch. He could really soak up those underneath targets that would have went to Etienne. And who knows, maybe they use him a bit, give him some carries because he's like a Swiss Army knife almost.
Yep.
He's got a lot of skills to line up all over the field. So I'm really high on Chenault.
Yeah. Peter Stark, in regards to our Swift comment, asks, what's up with Jamal Williams? He's part of that equation there too. You have a take on Swift versus Jamal Williams and all the talk we heard from from the offensive coordinator about 1A and 1B?
Well, at first I was a little concerned about Jamal Williams, but I mean, with Swift's skill set and how many targets he should get, I mean, he had over 50 targets in only like 13 games. So that could outweigh any concerns with Jamal Williams. Like we've seen
Yep.
pass catching backs like Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara really have a backup that has a decent role, and it doesn't really affect them. And Swift's in the same mold in that case. So I'm not too worried about Jamal Williams.
Okay. I'm not really either. Anthony Lynn scares me just a little bit, but we all saw that. I mean, even when Austin Eckler got limited in the amount of carries he got, he still, he still produced what he did. So it is in a PPR league. It's all about the catches. That's absolutely right. Okay. James Robinson versus Jk Dobbins.
That's another one that I really was battling with because I like Dobbins. I think he'll get more of a role in the passing game than he did last year, and he's a special runner, averaging 6 yards per carry. But with Robinson, I think he's safer because he has more of a bankable role in the passing game, and he'll likely see more volume than Dobbins will now that Etienne's out for the season. So I slightly go with Robinson there.
Okay, very good. Let's go one more here. Let's go Robinson versus Joe Mixon. A lot of people love Joe Mixon. A lot of people hate Joe Mixon. Where do you fall?
I like Joe Mixon. I mean, last year before the season-ending injury, he was averaging over, I believe it was like 22 touches per game. Gio Bernard's gone. He's going to really take over the passing game role. And we could see the Bengals lean on Mixon more, at least in the early going, as Joe Burrow gets his legs back coming off that torn ACL. So I got to go to Joe Mixon there. Even with O-line concerns, I'm just betting on the volume there.
Yeah. So I'm a self-hating Bengals fan. And the only one on the West Coast that I'm aware of now. But our numbers are dwindling. I worry about the offensive line too. I worry that maybe Chris Evans comes out and plays the Gio Bernard role a little bit there. There's been a lot of wows in training camp about his hands. But they've also come out and said, sometimes you have to take them at face value, that it's going to be the most volume he's ever had. So we'll see. I think a lot of people who were burned by the experience last year will probably shy away. Others who haven't, drank from that cup yet might be a little bit more inclined to go there. I'm going to hold off one other either or for you because I know it's going to be in one of your takes. So we'll save that one there later on. But let's move on to some other news here. We a lot of other stuff going on. And the other big thing we woke up to this morning, Sony Michel got traded to the Rams for 2 conditional draft picks, 5th and 6th round. Obviously, if you're a Darrell Henderson guy, this is a threat. What's your take on this?
Well, I started at first not worrying too much about Michel, because I figured that the Rams were just concerned about their depth behind him with Xavier Jones and Jake Funk, and especially with Henderson getting that thumb injury, just the timing of trading immediately. Maybe I thought they were a little concerned. But then I see like Adam Schefter on Sirius today, he's hyping up Sony Michel as a player who could potentially take the lead role. And I shout out to JJ Zacharias, and a cool stat here. From Next Gen Stats, Michel had the highest rushing yards over expectation per attempt among running backs with 50 or more carries, which tells us that, hey, maybe he's not as washed up as people think. And then another source, Pat's beat writer, Jeff Howe for The Athletic, he was saying how Michel is having the best camp of his career. He's finally fully healthy. So I'm a little bit worried now, and it looks like a situation to avoid. I'd rather wait and just take a dart throw with Sony Michel, especially with how, Darrell Henderson has showed some durability issues. And the fact that they gave up 2 draft picks, I mean, they could have waited for some roster cuts and taken on a veteran, but they went out and traded for him. So that concerns me, and I'm avoiding Darrell Henderson now.
I can appreciate that. My concern too is we have a dwindling class of guys that we can slot in as our RB2. If you don't grab 2 early on, say if you're drafting early, you've got CMC at start off your draft. The guys that you're comfortable with as your RB2 might be gone by the time you get to the turn. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I've seen it happen, and especially if you want to profit on some of those receivers that look so tasty there. I mean, you go in the 5th round. Who you taking?
Yeah, it's definitely tough with RB2. What I like to do is try to go after a Javonte Williams and pair him with Raheem Mostert, because we've seen how teams have eased rookie running backs in, especially looking last year, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers. So I think with Raheem Mostert, he'll jump out as the lead back, at least in the early going, and then you can transition to Javonte Williams once he fully asserts his role on that backfield. I like going that route if I wait on RB2.
Sure. I have Henderson a couple places, or I already have him, so I'm not gonna trade him low because I just don't think there's any profit in doing that. But I still think he plays. I still think he's solid. I like his skills. And I don't think like Sony Michel is much of a pass catcher, for instance. I think Henderson's probably better in that respect. So I'm not going to panic in those situations, but yeah, I'm probably going to wait till round 5, round 6 now to pull that trigger on him. I might not cross him off my list entirely, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's the 5th or 6th round and I'm desperate, I'd consider it. It's just I'm not really excited about him anymore.
I can appreciate that. Quick note from our sponsors at WinBet, who are sponsoring every one of our podcasts this football season. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WinBet, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WinBet is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WinBet brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, money line bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WinBet's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WinBet is now currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WinBet, the possibilities are limitless. WinBet is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WinBet now. That's WYNNBET, WinBet, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcasts. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Frank Ammirante. You can read and listen to Frank at a lot of different places: 4x4 football, the Game Day, RotoBaller, and the Fantasy Jones. Let's hit up a couple more news items and we'll get into some of Frank's takes. Teddy Bridgewater named the starter in Denver. Good news, bad news if you're a Jerry Jeudy guy or a Cortland Sutton guy.
Phenomenal news if you're a Jerry Jeudy guy. You know, Jerry Jeudy was held back by Drew Lock last year with all those uncatchable targets. Bridgewater is more accurate. And with a player like Jerry Jeudy, who's got great route running skills and he could separate very well, it fits in perfectly. I was already really high on Jeudy, and this just cements it as he's actually one of my takes. We could get into him a little more later, but I love this for Jerry Jeudy. For Cortland Sutton, it hurts him a bit just because Drew Lock, you know, last year, I believe according to Sports Info Solutions, he led an average depth of target per throw. So he loves to chuck it downfield, which fits in nicely with Sutton. So I was already low on Sutton coming off the ACL, and I'm really not targeting him too much there. And then we saw last year Bridgewater, he supported 3 top 30 wide receivers in Carolina. Who knows? Maybe he could do that with Jeudy, Fant, and hey, maybe even Sutton. And even KJ Hamler is a decently round dart throw with his speed out of the slot.
Yeah, I like Hamler. Even Tim Patrick played well at times last year too, but I think Patrick's going to get hurt a lot just with everybody back. But yeah, funny thing about Bridgewater is he supported that despite throwing so few touchdowns. You know, it wasn't touchdown dependent. So they're you know, that kind of skews both ways. He didn't finish the drill, or you know, you could argue, or just the situation didn't merit for it. You know, they might have run the ball more in the red zone, for instance. That's one thing to look at it that way too. Plus the offensive line is what it is in Carolina. So that probably held them back a little bit too. It was interesting. My initial reaction was like, they're going for the steady guy. They're not going for the upside guy. But then thinking it through a little bit more, of course they are. I think you tweeted out something that made a lot of sense. And this is a Vic Fangio protecting his job sort of decision too. He's going with the safe option. Coaches don't like to be embarrassed, whether it's baseball, football, you know, all that. They're going to take away a little bit of ceiling and try to get the steady guy a lot, especially when you got a good defense in place. Yeah,
exactly. Like I know from the outside, as outside observers, we're like, you know, it's Super Bowl or playoff contender or bust. But I mean, this is a human who wants to keep his job. Like Bridgewater could protect the football. That defense is elite. Who knows? They can make the playoffs this year. And even if they lose in the first round, that would be looked at as a successful season and help Fangio keep his job. So I think that's definitely what his mindset was there.
And it's his first time as a head coach too. So you get that, you know, it's important to get that because you may not get that second chance without any success there. So at any rate, Curtis Samuel, when he signed, everyone's like, okay, this is a good fit. I like this. You got Fitzpatrick, you've got McLaurin, and now you've got a good second receiver in Samuel. Well, he hasn't practiced yet. You know, it's been 3 months since this groin injury happened, and they keep steadily increasing his work rate, but at some point, doesn't he have to have a full practice? I'm kind of concerned about this injury.
Yeah, it's a bit concerning, but I did find some positive news. Washington beat writer Rhiannon Walker from The Athletic, she said that Ron Rivera said today that Curtis Samuel increased their workload, they're hoping to have him on the field next week. So at least he'll get some reps in and practice before the season starts, it looks like. But of course, we have to expect, a slow start for Samuel, joining a new team, limited offensive work. But the good news is that he has experience in Scott Turner's system, so that could help him get up to speed more quickly than a normal case if he was learning a new offense. So for Samuel, if he falls because people are concerned about the injury, he looks like a decent value right now. He finished our wide receiver 27 PPR points per game last year, and I'm pretty sure he's going like in the 40 range right now, at least on underdog drafts, best balls. So you could buy the dip here with Samuel, I would say.
Yeah, I think you probably could too. I don't care about the preseason. I just want to see practices. I just want to see the reports because, like you said, he's worked with Turner before. It's not a huge deal that he's not necessarily learning offense. He is learning a quarterback in Fitzpatrick, and I want it for McLaurin's sake. I want him healthy too because I love myself some Terry McLaurin. I want to have a good receiver opposite him. I'm of the belief that yes, I want a bell cow receiver. I want a guy that gets the majority of the targets, but I want a decent second receiver along with him there, just to kind of draw some of the attention away.
Yeah, for sure. And last year, we saw the supporting cast last year very limited, and there's upgrades in Washington with Ryan Fitzpatrick, so it'll definitely help McLaurin. I used to be more like of the type who preferred that, as you said, bell cow wide receiver, but I'm leaning more towards you want at least that solid threat beside them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the other thing, just Washington, what do you think about Fitzpatrick there? Go ahead. Just go ahead. I'll throw in my comment after.
Well, I know some people like him late round in fantasy. He likes to he could help out McLaurin, and he could. It's definitely a quarterback upgrade. But you might not see, I know we're used to how exciting he was in Tampa Bay and to some extent with Miami, but Washington's defense is totally elite, so you might see more of a tone. Maybe Fitzpatrick isn't that usual gunslinging type, and he tries to protect the football a little more to fit in with their really good defense. So I'm not really targeting him in fantasy.
Right. I was really excited just for McLaurin's sake, but it's weird being excited about a 38-year-old journeyman. It just shows how low the quarterback court play has been the last 2 years in DC. I guess that's more the take on that. Then finally, Dak, autocorrect said day in my outline to you, but I think he probably figured out. Dak Prescott finally progressed to throwing 7-on-7s. First time he's been throwing against any sort of defense since this shoulder injury. It's not late. I mean, there's still 2 weeks, but it's not early either. It's a little while since we've seen him throw the ball, and he's coming back from the major ankle injury. Are you fading him at all?
Yeah, I'm avoiding Dak, especially because of the opportunity cost. There's other quarterbacks there who don't have these injury concerns, like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, or if you could even wait and take Ryan Tannehill. I just don't like to take a player coming off such a serious injury, especially in this situation. Dak, like you said, with the shoulder injury, just recovering from it. I would just rather play it safe and go with someone like Russ.
Yeah. There's probably not going to be, he probably won't play in the preseason game this weekend. They do play the Thursday game at Tampa Bay. It's a tough start to go right back into that game too, with facing that pass rush.
Oh yeah.
We'll see how his mobility is going to be real quick. But it's interesting. It's weird. We have 3 preseason games this year and an extra regular season game. We've got 2 weeks between the regular season starting and the last preseason game. It's a different rhythm this year. We always look at the third preseason game as our dress rehearsal, although some teams have been blowing that off anyhow. What do you do with the preseason? What are you looking for in the preseason this year?
It's definitely tough because it's the first year with only 3 games. But what I've really focused on is just right now the quarterback battles. I think we'll see some closure with Jameis Winston taking over and starting week 1 over Taysom Hill. And, it'll be interesting to see Mac Jones. He has an opportunity now with Cam Newton out. He's under COVID protocols. And speaking of Mac Jones, I want to just draw attention to a tweet I saw. Doug Kied of PFF, he said Mac Jones was tearing it up today in joint practice with the Giants as he threw a long touchdown at Jacoby Myers. I mean, if he really runs with this opportunity, who knows? Maybe he starts week 1.
Yeah, he might. And I actually saw a tweet that said that one Pats beat writer thinks he's going to do that there. And that's interesting. I just finished up a dynasty league draft that I'm in and threw a late round dart on Mac Jones, even though I have a couple other quarterbacks. I don't have an elite quarterback though. I just have a lot of, I have run of the mill quarterbacks like Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz. It's not a good team, by the way. We're working on trying to improve it there, but I got Taysom Hill as a dart throw and he might not even start. Why not take another chance?
Why not? And if you dabble in some sports betting, it's probably still, last I checked, it was like plus 250 for him to start week 1 on DraftKings Sportsbook. If they haven't updated it yet from today's news, I mean, worth a sprinkle.
Sure. Where are you right now, by the way?
Oh, I'm in London, Ontario, in Canada.
Okay.
So I can't use DraftKings Sportsbook, but I do cite that whenever I'm talking about bets, just because it's a popular sports book.
Sure.
I usually use Bet365, but
so you do have an outlet. That's good.
Yeah.
See, I'm in LA and there's no sports betting in the state still, at least not from a legal channel. So, I mean, everybody's got a guy, I suppose, but or some illicit website, but I don't do any of those things. I promise, swear, if you're listening here, anybody that cares. But I can drive to Vegas, so that's not so bad. I've got that going for me. Before we move on to some of Frank's takes, let's get another note from one of our sponsors. Are you tired of the same old fantasy football leagues that get canceled after a year or so? If so, Dynasty Owner has your back. Go to dynastyowner.com. New leagues for the 2021 season are forming now. Dynasty Owner unites the fun and excitement of fantasy football with the skill and strategy of the front office by incorporating a salary cap and real NFL player salaries for diehard fantasy football fans that want the real GM experience. Dynasty Owner adds a whole new level of strategy. Are you worried that you won't be able to find anyone to play in your league? Don't worry. Dynasty Owner can help you fill your league with fantasy football enthusiasts like yourself. You won't have to worry about finding enough players. You can choose to start a league, join an existing, or purchase a team from a previous owner. If you're serious about joining the big leagues, go to dynastyowner.com/Rotowire and start your Dynasty League today. I'm here with Frank Ammirante. You can catch Frank at 4for4 Football, The Game Day, RotoBaller, and the Fantasy Jones. The Fantasy Jones, you guys did a prop bet podcast, so some good stuff there. What's your favorite prop bet of the season?
Oh, well, one of them that I like is taking the under on Travis Kelce. It's around 1,400-ish yards, and I just feel like, I know there's an extra game, but that's a high bar for a tight end. I mean, Kelce did that once, I believe, and, the Chiefs are likely to, you could see them rest Kelce in the last week of the year if they have the top seed locked up. And with props, it's always good, especially when it's a high bar, to try to lean towards the under, because there's just so much that could go wrong. They miss one game and you're you might lose just because of that. So that's one that I really like.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's the extra game counterbalanced by, in fact, Hill missed games last year. Sammy Watkins missed a ton of time. Hardman really didn't take that next step. I get it all. What's your take on Michel Hardman, by the way? He's always a popular guy. If you're doing these underdog drafts, he always gets pushed up.
It's like he's a polarizing player because, Watkins is gone. He has a path to being the wide receiver too. I liked that. I know that he was raw coming out of college, so we could kind of give him a pass for his slow start to his career. But he's starting to go way too high on underdog drafts. Like I think he goes like in the top 40 wide receivers, or he's just going a little too high for my taste. But I mean, he had some positive reports in camp, so there's a clear path to the wide receiver too. I would just, if you're doing a best ball, only look towards Hardman if you have Mahomes and you're trying to make a Chiefs stack.
I like it. I've been playing more underdog lately. I got a late start on that. Didn't do too many of the early ones. I'm doing some puppy threes. Didn't get in the first two. Is that one of your favorite genres, is to play best balls, play underdog?
It's actually new to me, best ball this year. I always am the traditional season-long type.
Okay.
But, it's starting to grow on me. It's really fun. It's fun stacking your players because it's important to do that just to really raise the upside of your team. it's just fun. Like you have to really build a roster. It's almost like putting a puzzle together, like, okay,
For
I
sure.
got Will Fuller. Let me try to get Tua late, something like that. It's fun to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is you can do it quick with those 30-second picks. If you do a live one like that there, I had a flight delayed over the week, last week, and it's like, oh, okay, just jump in a
Yeah,
puppy
that's the
free draft
best.
there. No
Yeah,
problem.
right on your phone. It's the best.
It's useful there. All right, we're in the takes section of this podcast, and if you follow Frank on Twitter, if you don't, why not? You should at Ammirante TFJ. That's AMMIRANTE TFJ. Or you can just look at the screen and see it right there too. Frank's not shy. You're going to get lots of takes out of him. Let's start off with your all buy team though. This is one of my favorite ones here because I have to admit, I looked at yours and like, yeah, I'm on board with all this. I like that one. I like that one. Let's start off the quarterbacks. You list Lamar Jackson as one of your top buys this year.
Yeah, I love Lamar just because they really upgraded his supporting cast, drafting Rashad Bateman. I know he's injured, but you got to think he's back by October. And Bateman profiles as that potential alpha wide receiver one, and they've talked about sort of evolving their offense and incorporating more snaps under center for Lamar. They could really help him take the next step as a passer. Maybe they bump up the passing volume just a bit. I mean, they'll still be run heavy, but they'll give him more opportunities to pass. And I know Sammy Watkins really disappointed in Kansas City, but he's still a threat that can draw attention there. It's better than what they had before, the Willie Snead and the like. So you got to love that bump in supporting cast. And he's 1 year removed from a quarterback one finish. That rushing upside is awesome. So I'm really high on Lamar. Plus, you could get him like at least one or maybe even 2 rounds later than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson? Who do you got?
I've been grappling with that all offseason, because Kyler Murray before the shoulder injury was by far the QB1.
Yeah.
But I thought about it, and I'm going to lean with Lamar just because I think I like him better as a runner. It's hard to bank on all those touchdowns again for Kyler Murray, as rushing touchdowns, that is. And I like his upgrades on the supporting cast a little bit more than Kyler Murray, but they're neck and neck. They're in the same tier, both elite quarterbacks. I'd be ecstatic with either or.
Yeah, you're getting Lamar around later on average too, which is something I like. Or if you're in an auction, probably a few bucks cheaper too. Just did an auction yesterday where I wasn't planning on buying any of the top shelf QB and I ended up getting Lamar anyhow because I liked it. Stopped at 17, and it's a half point PPR. Yeah, let's go with that there. You can pay up. I feel like in a full point PPR, I want to pay up for the receiving options a little bit more and maybe go cheaper on the quarterback, but in a non-PPR or half point PPR, I'm going to probably bump up the quarterback a little bit more. I like him better than Dak. I like him better than Murray. I like him about the same as Allen even. I think that, and I think you don't have to pay that price. So I'm lockstep with you on him.
I just should say one more thing that I just came to my mind. I really like early season strength of schedule just because it's more projectable defenses earlier in the year. There's no injuries, and it's obviously good to get off to a good start. And look at Lamar's first 3 weeks. Against the Raiders, not a good defense. Against the Chiefs, potential shootout. Against the Lions, another terrible defense. So those are 3+ matchups to start off the year that really could act as a tiebreaker when you're thinking between these elite tier of quarterbacks.
Outside of Houston, the Raiders might have the worst defense in the NFL. They're awful, just awful.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think it's going to be tickets to the carnival with those games, especially early on. Maybe they prove me wrong. We'll see, but I doubt it. We'll go with one more QB among your takes. Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, not too many people are hyping him up right now. You're buying him a lot.
I like him because, last year was a tough offseason for him, rehabbing the injury, and he wasn't expected to start midseason. So they had to kind of adjust on the fly. They had Chan Gailey, the offensive coordinator. His system fit better for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And this offseason, they prioritized speed, signing Will Fuller, drafting Jalen Waddle. That'll really open things up for Tua. And he looks good in camp. I really like the supporting cast upgrades, and you can get him really late. So Tua is one of my late round quarterback dart throws.
I like it. So if you listen to a Rotowire podcast, we are a Jonathan Taylor Stan podcast. Chris Liss is big on him. Mario Puig is huge on him. I think John McKechnie's big on him. I like him a lot. And you like him a lot too.
Love Jonathan Taylor. I mean, look what he did down the stretch last year. His last 6 games, he ran for 741 yards and 7 touchdowns. Uh, if we look at his overall production, he put up the 5th highest PPR points per game for a 21-year-old running back since 2000. Only Saquon, Zeke, Clinton Portis, and Maurice Jones-Drew had higher averages. Like, that's elite early career production. We also could look another stat I got here. There were only 4 running backs with 35 or more 10-plus yard runs last year. Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, and Jonathan Taylor. And he did it only on 230 attempts. So you got to think, like, they got a great offensive line in Indy. They'll be run heavy. Nyheim Hines is there, but Jonathan Taylor showed he's no slouch in the passing game. That was one of his concerns coming out as a prospect, and he kind of addressed those. So, I mean, sky's the limit for Taylor. Originally, I was going too bold and putting him as my overall RB1. I smartened up, and I think he's a top 5 running back.
Yeah, I saw that in your RotoBaller article. Chris Lish just put Taylor at 3 in our rankings with Quentin Nelson coming back. So we're sharing a vibe on that one there. My only concern with Taylor is not Hines. I'm not worried about the workload. They made it work last year. I think they'll make it work even more this year. It's the offensive line. It's whether Fisher and Quentin Nelson are 100%, because he ran so much better to the left last year, and that's where there's the question marks. That's what I'm going to probably watch for, but the problem is I'm not going to watch for it. They're not using them in the preseason. We're not going to see anything out of that, but we'll see. But that, I think, if there's any sort of mystery, if there's any sort of concern, that's my only concern. But I've been getting him a lot. Now, for at one point he was going middle of the second round in underdog drafts after the news on Wentz and on Nelson. But I think that price is correcting again.
Oh, yeah. Now that we see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel and Wentz is going to be back probably much earlier than we all thought. Yeah, wheels up for Jonathan Taylor.
Give me another running back buy.
Another running back buy, as I'm a Washington football team fan, I got to go with Antonio Gibson.
Okay.
Last year was his first year in a new position as a wide receiver in college, and his concern would be like how he was as a runner, and he just addressed those concerns totally. We all know about his pass catching skills, and they've talked up how they want to increase his role in the passing game. I know in the preseason we're seeing them still use J.D. McKissick on third downs, but hey, Gibson could still. It's not like he can't catch passes on first and second down. And given the fact that he was a college receiver, he can get more of those wheel routes, or maybe line up. Who knows? Maybe they line him up all over the field. And we look last year, right before he had that turf toe injury, he really blew up against the Cowboys, and he had 7 targets that game. So you might have started to see it transition towards more of a Gibson-centric backfield until that injury kind of derailed his season. Then when he came back, they went back to McKissick in that regular role. So who knows what we would have been saying about Gibson had he not had that injury. He'd probably be going at least a couple picks higher. So I'm really high on him. I think he's a top 8 running back.
So that's a first-round pick for you then.
Yeah, but I won't. The way it plays out is because I think if I'm drafting towards the end of the first round, I'll take like hopefully an Adams falls or a Stephon Diggs, and then I try to hope that Gibson falls back to me, because he often goes right at the beginning of the second round. So I try to hope that he falls. But yeah, I'd be comfortable taking him, let's say, at 12 or 11.
I think there's some helium associated with Gibson too. Ever since Kyle Allen's comment saying, Scott Turner wants to make him the next McCaffrey, I think that might be one of those situations. Who the heck cares what Kyle Allen has to say, except for the fact that he was a quarterback under Turner, and so he knows him a little bit. But I don't know. It's just some, I think there's some definite helium here. By the way, a little heads up to the folks not heads up, but a thumbs up to the folks at Memphis. I mean, you've got Gibson, Darrell Henderson, and Tony Pollard all around the same time. That's a factory.
Yeah, and then I think, and Kenneth Gainwell now, the rookie on the Eagles.
Yeah.
I know he went 5th round, but people like him, and who knows, maybe he can make some sort of impact in the pros as well. Yeah, they're a factory there.
Yeah, cranking out they either recruiting well, they're developing well, they just got a great offense. Like Henderson averaged 9 yards a carry in college. I mean, it's crazy how good he was there. All right, let's move on to receivers. Who's your number one buy among wide receivers?
My number one buy among wide receivers, and I know he's getting a lot more publicity and positive takes on him now with Teddy Bridgewater starting, but it's Jerry Jeudy. I mean, like I said earlier, he was held back by Drew Lock with all the uncatchable targets. But we look at his early career production. He put up the 10th most receiving yards for a 21-year-old since 1990. I mean, he had drops, but so did Deontay Johnson. I like the fact that he gets open. His route running is good. According to Matt Harmon's reception perception, Judy's 75% success rate against man coverage, graded in the 87th percentile in reception perception history, and that's pretty impressive for a 21-year-old. And Teddy Bridgewater is more accurate. He checks it down more. Last year, his average throw depth was 6.8 yards, which was 28th in the NFL. So you'll likely see Jeudy get those underneath targets. I really think that he is the 2021 version of Deontay Johnson, of that clinical route runner who can get open, has separation skills, and takes a leap in year 2. And I think he's a top 22 wide receiver. I really love Jerry Jeudy.
I like him a lot. And one of the things I'm the tiny bit of concern is not the drops. I don't care about the drops. I don't care about it with Deontay Johnson. I don't care about it with Jamar Chase, for that matter, either. I think much is being overblown about that. And I know we might be at loggerheads on him. We'll get to him in a second. But I just think that you have the skills to get open. That'll work itself out. My tiny bit of concern is the lack of red zone targets. But that also might be a different quarterback issue. We'll see. He's not a big guy. He's not going to, you're not going to see too many flag routes. You're not going to see too many, corner routes for him. But if he is a great route runner, he's just not going to out physical a guy for a one-on-one. That's the one thing I'm a little concerned about.
Yeah, for sure. You likely see Cortland Sutton or even Noah Fant be more of the red zone threat. Definitely a valid concern. But I could see Jeudy leading in targets and catches.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes, that's kind of how it goes though, too. You get the smaller guy, shiftier guy, he's going to run better routes at full speed. So in the open field, he's deadlier. And then the bigger guy, Tim Patrick, got a lot of targets in the red zone last year, for instance. That's you don't need that as much because there's not as much space to operate in. So it's more about out physicaling the defender. So but again, that's a nitpick. The price you're paying for Jeudy, I'm with you on that too. I like him a lot. You also mentioned AJ Brown and Laviska Shenault. We talked about Shenault. AJ Brown was in the news recently because he tweaked his knee last week, but he's already practicing again this week.
Yeah, you never want to hear concerns about his knee with AJ Brown. He sort of seems to always be banged up. That's the one concern with him. But I mean, the fact that even though Julio Jones is there, I mean, Corey Davis had a 23% target share last year, so it's not like he was barely used. So Julio Jones could just step into that sort of role, and we could see the Titans pass it more with Julio there now. So AJ Brown's just talents through the roof, 10 plus yards per target each of his 2 seasons. He's a playmaker. Absolutely love him. I think he's a top 5 receiver.
Indeed. So fantasy football isn't all sunshine and rainbows. This isn't the family channel. We're not going to accentuate the positive. We are going to get Frank's fades. But before that, a quick note from our friends at Sleeper. What do your fraternity brother Steve, Katie from work, and your grandma all have in common? They're all waiting for that invite to your fantasy football league. There's no better way to hang out, no easier way to smack talk, and no more customizable platform to host your fantasy leagues on this year than Sleeper. Whether you have a redraft or a dynasty league that has been around for 10 years, Sleeper has everything you need in one app. Incredible commissioner tools and customizations, built-in messaging, support for snake draft, auction draft, and best ball leagues, blazing fast news, courtesy of Rotowire, stats, and scores, all in a beautifully designed mobile app and website that makes every other app feel like a horse and buggy. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy sports platform for a reason, and all the cool commissioners are switching to Sleeper and not looking back. Don't just take my word for it. Download Sleeper on iOS or Android and see for yourself. You have nothing to lose. It's free. I just finished a draft actually on Sleeper. It's a dynasty league I'm in. Formerly Major League Baseball pitcher Brad Ziegler runs this league. He is a big-time fantasy football fan. Like to the point, like when he was still pitching, if the game was like in the 3rd inning, he'd be shooting off a trade offer to me. It was kind of crazy, but he's a nut. I love it. I mean,
cool.
It's just I get trade offers in March from him all the time. It's like, dude, it's March. I'm busy, but it's all right.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's great, and he's super nice dude. He's a great guy. So anyhow, no, this isn't a Brad Ziegler cast, as much as we love him. Let's get on to talking a little bit about your fades. This is where people, this is some good. This is, I think, where the rubber hits the road a lot. It helps save people from themselves. We talked about Dak already, so I'm not going to serve that one up to you. I'm gonna let you slay me. I'm gonna let you stab me in the heart and go with Joe Burrow here, because I am that self-hating Bengals fan. Why are you fading Joe Burrow?
Well, I love Joe Burrow's situation, and it's just the fact of him coming off a torn ACL, and he even tore, like, it was a serious injury, tore it around in November, not really like that long of a recovery. And it's just going back to what I said with Dak. I don't want to take any player who already has this concern coming off a serious injury.
Mm-hmm.
And the offensive line is still a work in progress. I know the wide
That's
receivers
kind,
are awesome.
by the way. That's very kind to say work in progress. It's caca. It's terrible.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe they play it conservative and more quick passes for Burrow. This isn't really the year where I could see him hitting his ceiling. So I prefer not to really invest in him, and I'd rather take him next year when he's a year removed from the injury. It's really not about the player. It's just about being risk averse with a player coming off the injury.
Gotcha. I'm worried about the mobility a little bit. Is he going to be able to? Because he wasn't like Lamar or anything, but he also wasn't a statue. He was able to run a little bit here and there. There even sometimes some design plays. I think those go away this year because they're not going to expose them as much as they can, and so that means you just don't get. Maybe instead of 4 rushing touchdowns, you get 2. Instead of 200 rushing yards, you get 75. That's the thing. I think you lose that this year too.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a concern for me. But I mean, I could understand why people like him. You got to love those wide receivers there.
Yeah. All right, give me another fade.
Another fade is someone who I've gone countless debates on Twitter. I just don't like CEH this year. I know the Chiefs really upgraded their offensive line with Orlando Brown and Joe Thuney, but we think about the player. Let's start it like this. So going into the draft that year, he was the consensus, let's say, number 3. It was clearly Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift ahead of him. The Chiefs reached on CEH. Let's face it. We look at his rookie year. He starts off with a huge workload, and then his workload gets scaled back, and they sign Le'Veon Bell. Usually with rookie running backs, you see them start off slow and then start to really take over, like we saw with Gibson, Swift, Akers, and the like. So that concerns me a bit. Also, the fact that, it's an extremely pass-heavy offense. Like Mahomes also doesn't really target running backs as much as we think. Like, he targeted Kareem Hunt 3.18 targets per game. CH was 4.15. I'm not sure that passing upside, like that receiving upside that everyone thinks CH has, I don't know if it's there. Plus, according to Ian Rappaport earlier in the offseason, they really tried hard at signing Gio Bernard, and he chose Tampa Bay. So they settled on Jerick McKinnon. Okay, Jerick McKinnon isn't really a household name or anyone to really write home too much about, but he's a good receiving back. So the fact that they pursued Gio and then settled on another one who specializes in the passing game, it kind of tells me maybe they want another back there to help maybe in pass protection or catch passes out of the backfield. And McKinnon was getting talked up in camp, so it's likely he'll make the team and he could have a role. And CH he doesn't have the greatest size, he's not explosive. It's just that people are really putting a lot of stock in the situation. I know it's a good situation, but hey, we've seen the Chiefs show a willingness to add veteran backs too. Like with Damian Williams, they added LaShawn McCoy. With last year with CH, they added Le'Veon Bell. So it's just that I don't really see that upside of taking him, let's say, in the second round. If he falls maybe end of the third, I'm okay with him. It's just I'm not as bullish on the player himself, and I think we're putting too much into the situation.
Yeah, you kind of, and I was going to preempt the question. Yeah, you kind of preempted the question. I was going to say James Robinson or CEH. I think it's pretty obvious for you.
Yeah, for me, it's James Robinson because we've seen him do it already. He had that top 5 season under his belt. Obviously, had a ridiculous workload, but it won't be as high. But I just trust him more, even though he's in a worse offense. The offense shouldn't be like it should be much improved with Trevor Lawrence and company. So I take James Robinson over CH.
Yeah, and begrudging. I want to believe in CH. I want to like totally buy into him, but I think you're right. I think he's probably going a little overdrafted. I think he's more of a third round back instead of a second round back. Even like in the Chiefs run exquisite screen passes, but it's to Darrell Williams. Although Williams has a concussion right now, probably. But that's the point is they wanted to have a guy who could block a little bit more, and I don't think CH is great in pass pro. He's now got an ankle problem again. It's not a high ankle like it was last year, but yeah, I share your concern a little bit there. So not surprised. And I cheated. I looked ahead at your article and knew about your objections to him. But good stuff, by the way. Just you can follow it. You've tweeted it out recently here. Let's move on to let's get you one more. Let's get one more running back fade.
One more running back fade, just thinking about it and what we talked about earlier on the show with Darrell Henderson. I think I got to add him to the list now. Okay. Because I know he still has a good chance of being the 1A in the offense, but he could easily lose the job to Sony Michel. You never know, or at least have a split. And the fact that he has durability issues, unless he's going like where Mike Davis goes or Myles Gaskin, those types, sometimes they go 6th round.
Yep.
I'm gonna steer clear of Henderson now.
Okay, fair enough. I saw that a while ago you tweeted out another guy that's on your fade list is Chris Carson, and I know that this is another polarizing player. Some people love him, take him like end of the second, beginning of the third. Others won't take him until the 4th. Are you towards that bottom end of that spectrum?
Yes, I am. I know people love him. I could see why. You saw the uptick in receiving usage last year, and he's been a consistent player. It's just like the durability issues for me. And, I know Rashad Penny isn't great, but he's going to be back. Maybe they give him a little more work. But it comes down mostly to the durability issues. I'd rather go with David Montgomery, where we saw him totally dominate down the stretch. Even in weak matchups, I always say, like, good players exploit weak matchups. I don't really hold that against them. So that's an example of a player I'd take over Carson.
Very good. Let's move to wide receiver. Why are you such a monster? Why do you hate Jamar Chase?
It's just about the fact that I know he's considered a generational wide receiver prospect, and it comes down to how high he's being drafted. Like an underdog, I know it's starting to fall with his training, with his preseason struggles with drops, but he was going in the top 25. And this is a player who's competing for targets with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Burrow coming off the injury. Maybe they aren't nearly as pass heavy as last year, where he averaged like 40 attempts per game. It's just about the price for me with Chase. I mean, I know he's such a good prospect, but like we think back to other generational prospects, Calvin Johnson, his rookie year, I think he had like 800-ish yards. So it's not like all of these rookie receivers are going to totally pop right away. So if he had less target competition, I'd be more in, but I'd prefer to go with T. Higgins instead.
I like Higgins better than Chase too. I think that price is changing though. Yesterday we did the Rotowire Stake League auction, a 14-team half-point PPR league. We have a stake dinner side bet. It's awesome. And I highly recommend doing this, by the way. It's a great way to keep in touch with people, keep people involved all season long. So at any rate, Higgins went for 22. And we start 3 receivers in a flex, 14-team league, $200 budget. I got Chase for 14. I wasn't planning on getting him. I just couldn't pass up that price.
Well, in that case, that's definitely more appealing to me, just because you could, like you said, with all the concerns coming out with the negative reports coming out, you're starting to see a dip. So if I see him, let's say, to put that in the context of ADP, let's say he goes like outside the top 30 instead of like 23 where he was about 2 weeks ago, it's more easy to digest. I felt like he was being priced closer to his ceiling as a rookie, and that's why I was out. But the way you got him, I'd be totally on board with that. It's not really about the player in this fade.
It's about the market. I'll buy you on that one. How about Keenan Allen? He's a guy that's going solidly about 10 to 12 among wide receivers in pretty much every draft. You seem to be lower on him. Why?
I'm a little bit lower on him just because, we saw his yards per target really decrease. He gets those really short yardage targets. And we saw how offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi is really talking up Mike Williams as the X receiver in his offense. Not to say that that's going to make him the top option, but it could eat away at Keenan Allen. But the most important reason why I'm more out on Keenan Allen is just the fact that I prefer a couple other receivers at his price, like Allen Robinson, is the clear-cut one, and he'll play with Justin Fields now eventually. And I like CeeDee Lamb to really take the next step. I'd rather take a roll of the dice on Lamb in year 2 than taking Allen, but I really can't fault anyone who likes Keenan Allen. It's just my preference for those other two.
I will say that Allen's not going to be the big play guy. They got Mike Williams for that. He may not be the red zone target. Same reason. We saw a lot of those contested throws going to Williams last year, and I think that might change. In favor, I think they improved that offensive line quite a bit this offseason. That gives Herbert a little bit more time, let Allen run those routes that he's so really good at doing. But yeah, he's not a huge guy. He's not going to out athlete anybody necessarily. He's gonna run circles around people, but he's not going to do it by just pure overpowering them. So I see some of that as well. Let's dig a little bit into Frank's background, but first, quick note from our Blue Wire sponsors. And that was a quick note. Thanks for Blue Wire for the platform to record these podcasts. All right, so we've got your takes, we've got your fades. Let's learn a little bit more about you. How did you get into our business? How did you get into being a pundit for fantasy football and fantasy baseball?
Well, my friends and I were fantasy sports nuts. We've been playing for 15 years since I'm 32 now, since I was in the 10th grade. And,
Nice.
We played fantasy baseball, fantasy football, hockey, basketball, all the 4 major sports. And, we have a bunch of group chats on WhatsApp where we're always talking about sports, fantasy or real life, whatever. And I'd always fire off some takes, and instead of taking it from the WhatsApp group chats, I took it to Twitter and made an account just because I love discussing sports. And that's how I started. I was always thought of myself as a good writer and always loved to write about sports. So I said, hey, why not give it a shot? So it started with just firing my takes on Twitter. Then I started with a website. Then I got over to RotoBaller. And then it's just been steadily working towards that. I love doing this. It's what I think is my passion. And I'm happy to have joined the fantasy football, fantasy baseball industry.
Yeah, it's an ever-growing community, and it's hard to get in because anybody can have a take, right? And you just have to, if you write a lot, if you communicate well, you'll gain some traction. But you're writing for a number of different sites. You have to keep it all tight. Who you're writing, what for each site, and all that. Do you have a real life job also in addition to this?
Yes, I work as a teacher, but right now I'm working as a substitute teacher, and I'm off for the summer, so I have more time to, write content, just debate on Twitter. But
okay, great.
Starting in the school year, I'll have to manage my time really well. Maybe wake up extra early to get that article in, or stay up a little later. But I'll try my best to find the balance. That's
what level do you usually teach at?
Well, usually in elementary school, usually between grades 1 to 5, I'll have different classes. I took on a couple longer term assignments, 2 grade 1 classes last year. So, but
okay,
my preference, I'd probably say, let's say the 5th grade level.
In Ontario, are kids going back in person to school this fall?
Yes, yeah, they are, with having to wear masks, and there's COVID screenings, and there'll be social at recess, they'll have social distance protocols, things like that. Yeah.
Sure. And it's a challenge. And I imagine teaching during this era has been really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you, last year at the tail end from, let's say, April to the end of the year, we went back online, and it's tough. It's hard for the kids, especially at a younger age, to take it as seriously, especially if they're in grade 8, their camera's off, and you don't really have to, they're not expected to turn it on. So it feels like you're talking to a blank screen sometimes.
Oh,
yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
I can only imagine. It's very difficult. It's difficult for everybody involved, the kids, the teachers, everybody, but parents that have to deal with, okay, your young child is at home now. What do you do? And if you had a job to go to, dealing with all that is also very difficult too. So very tough all around. What type of league do you like to play in the most?
Well, I'm more traditional. I like to play that season-long fantasy football league, 1 quarterback. My friends in my higher stake home league, they're stubborn. They want to stick to 2 wide receiver, but I prefer 3 just because there's so many wide receivers. So they're ancient there with that. But
sure.
like the standard format like that, but I like half PPR over PPR just because I hate how it, like those really check down receptions, to especially those players like JD McKissick, they get, in my opinion, too much of a bump in PPR. So I think half PPR gives a nice balance.
Sure, I can buy into that, and I think that's actually like a lot of the Rotowire leagues are played that way too. Best finish ever. What's your best fantasy football team? Who did you build like this monster team, or do you have a favorite one that you built? What's your best fantasy football story?
One of my recent teams that I like, I didn't win that year, but I really liked the team. Like I won last year in this home league, but what happened was I was super high on Lamar Jackson heading into the 2019 season, and I just drafted him like at least one or maybe even 2 rounds above consensus. I was that confident that he was going to really, really hit and pop
Right.
off. So I had him. And then in that league heading into the year, I was really high on Chris Godwin and Dalvin Cook. And I wasn't able to get him in the draft, but as I was on vacation in Italy, I was able to negotiate with my friend, and I traded before the year. I traded him Tyreek Hill and Sony Michel, who was a 4th rounder at that time. He had that ADP for Cook and Godwin, and that was the year Godwin really took off. And Cook was one of the top 5 backs. So that was my favorite trade, and I really liked that team. It fell short in the end, but I like that move there.
Yeah. I had a lot of Lamar that year too, and it was really fun seeing him just jump on the stage and make a big presence there. He had that little tease at the end of the season, kind of gave you the hint that maybe this is going to happen, and then it more than fulfilled our expectations. So I love that as well. A format you don't like playing in?
A format that I don't like playing in. Well,
it could be none of the above. It could be a null set.
To some extent, I like every format. I'm a fantasy football nut, but I kind of like I'm starting to come around to super flex leagues, but it's just a huge transition after years of, not taking quarterbacks so high. But in super flex, for those who don't know, is when you start 2 quarterbacks, basically, they just fly off the board. So it's definitely a huge adjustment for me there. But that would be probably, even though I still like it, it's probably the worst of the best of options, basically.
If I made you king of the world and I had that sort of power and you could choose anything to change in fantasy football, about football generally, what would it be?
That's really tough.
I know I didn't prepare you for that one either, so I'm just throwing that at you right now.
I know it's fun and how we like to target those quarterbacks with that rushing yard bump, but maybe if you could find a scoring system that more accurately depicts real life football in a sense, because I feel like if you think about it, like these rushing yards for quarterbacks really bump them up way too much. I mean, Kyler Murray is a stud fantasy quarterback, but would you really say that he's a top 10 quarterback in real life yet? Or maybe not. Or like Jalen Hurts, everyone's so hyped about him in fantasy, but he's a huge question mark in real life. So if you gave me that power, maybe to find like the perfectly balanced, I'm not sure the answer to it, but a way to even that out with the disparity because of quarterback rushing yards.
I'll buttress your point. I'll use the Wayback Machine to do that too. Troy Aikman was never a good fantasy quarterback. Didn't have the volume, didn't have the mobility, obviously, but got the job done. He was super reliable, didn't throw picks, always had a great, percentage. It helps to have Emmitt Smith as just tearing it apart. But, fantasy is structured, A is one starting quarterback instead of super flex, and B, you didn't have the volume. And he didn't run. So he really wasn't even he was borderline not draftable fantasy quarterback. There were some years he was, but it's weird. He's such a proficient real life quarterback, but not that valuable in fantasy. And that's one of the reasons why I like super flex leagues is, you get a guy like Baker Mayfield. He's a very solid quarterback, but in your normal 12-team league with one quarterback, you're not even drafting him, or you're drafting him in the last round.
That's true. And with that point, you're even convincing me a little more on super flex league.
There you go. Very cool.
That's a good point.
What do you got coming out next? Where's your next article coming?
Well, you can I'm working on 4 for 4. We have this series called Perfect Draft where the writer will take a pick in a certain format. Let's say I have the 7th pick in Yahoo, and you go through an app called Draft Hero, and it uses Yahoo ADP. and I'll be writing like my favorite pick in each round and constructing a team with a paragraph explanation for each player. So
Nice.
that's one thing you can check out. You could see towards the season, once it starts, RotoBaller, I'll be doing the weekly matchups column, talking about which players I like on a given matchup, some DFS content there, more betting content on the game day. You could even look out my fantasy football podcast on the Fantasy Jones. We're still, last episode, like you said, was about the props. And my rankings we have a website there where I post my rankings, which we're working on too. So those are all a bunch of things I'm working on. It's busy time, exciting time though, with the season right around the corner.
Yeah, indeed. Hey, Frank, this has been awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me, and good luck this season. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. It's been an honor being on your show, and yeah, good luck to you too. Hope to come back one time.
You bet. Coming up tomorrow on the RotoWire podcast, we got Mario Puig and John McKechnie, as always, on Thursday. On baseball, I got the great Alex Fast joining me, so that should be a lot of fun as well. Alex from Pitcher List, ESPN, MLB, and you name it. He's a rising star, so excited to have Alex with us. So thanks again for listening. Thanks to WynnBET for the sponsorship. Good luck in your drafts. Have a great day.